Hello and welcome to week 6 in Psychology of Personality. And chapter 8, I believe, introduces us to the work of two researchers, probably some of the most, two of some of the most famous names in psychology, and that's Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. However, what we're going to be looking at is areas of their expertise that are different from what they're most famous for. Now, Carl Rogers is most famous for developing the person-centered therapeutic approach that dominates almost every model of psychotherapy to this day. It is a complete respect for the individual. There's no conditions. An unconditional positive regard is what he introduced into the therapeutic session, where the individual that you're working with, essentially the mindset, it doesn't matter what you did, you're still a person, you're still, it doesn't matter what habit you're trying to break, you're still a whole person worthy of being helped, worthy of being a human being. That mindset that Carl Rogers popularized is now almost essentially presumed across almost the entire helping profession. In fact, when we meet individuals who do not practice that, refer to us as patient number 12 or something like that, and depersonalize us and don't talk about our feelings, we're often offended by that. That used to be the rule. You went to the, bedside manner wasn't considered very important. But Carl Rogers introduces that idea to there, but that's not what we're talking about in this class. And Abraham Maslow, second to Freud, probably, maybe not his name, but his theory is one of the most popular theories in psychology, and that's his hierarchy of needs. And that's that triangle, usually kind of a rainbow colors, that look at basic needs all the way up to self-actualization. Both of them were humanist psychologists. They're moving away from the reductionist aspect that came from Freud and behaviorism, that human beings, whole free will thing. We talked a little bit about freedom when we talked about earlier, Eric Fromm and all those people. These people were Carl Rogers. These were contemporary. Carl Rogers was alive when I first started studying psychology. So we're looking at generations of people that are more in the modern era, and more in the modern era, and then we have, of course, Abraham Maslow's work with the hierarchy. Now, instead of focusing on those two things, though, we're going to be focusing on the things that they did to contribute to personality. Now, Maslow, with that hierarchy, focused on human values. Now, values, I like the definition that we get from sociology, because our value systems are both a function of our individual choices and personality and the society that we grew up in. It's basically the hierarchy of what's important. So what's the most important thing in your life, the second most important thing in your life, the third most important thing in our life, and how that shapes the way we act, which the way we act is a reflection of our personality. Maslow believed very much in the importance of values. Now, what I want to think, we know the answer when I ask you to think, do public characters actually reveal their values, or do they pick values that they think their constituency wants to hear? Let's take a look at that, because sometimes we don't know. Sometimes an individual may espouse a certain opinion on things, refer to their value system that they have, be it religious or moral or ethical, all those different models that we have about doing the right thing. And to what degree can we rely on that in terms of judging and understanding that person's personality? And judging someone's personality is important when we're voting for them. So we see public figures doing this process. How is that different maybe than the way you portray your values? Or there's sometimes it's difficult to do that. Maybe you're in a group that, you like all the people in your group, you're working with them, but you know that you have some significantly different values than the people around you. How easy is it to be yourself? Do you avoid topics? Do you get, all of those things? Do you have specific groups that you go to let it all out? You know, if you're liberal or conservative, like I kind of hold my own until I'm with my liberal or conservative friends, and then I just go to it and I feel much more comfortable about expressing that part of myself, just managing the way in which we interact in the world, which I'm going to say it sounds like you're being untruthful, untrue to yourself, but you're also being kind to other people. You're not engaging, you're not using every opportunity to engage in deep discourse about value systems, which of course I think kind of has been going on for the past maybe 10 years or so. We've seen a lot of people where those value systems, they're being brought right into the conversation. And maybe now is not always the time to bring that up. You know, you think about those conversations that happen, you know, invite somebody over your house and then you're having some political discussion about the president. Maybe there should be a list of topics. We're not going to talk about those because we want to define this event differently. And we know that bringing up those topics will move this event in another way. When we share so much more than we disagree on, why do we have to focus on what we disagree on? So those kinds of practices. But let's talk about how you deal with your own values in the presence of people who share those values or don't, and how we see that in the public sector. In the quiz, there's a couple questions. The first, I'm looking at Carl Rogers now, and when we are engaged with a client, perspective taking is a very important part of Rogers' sense of the unconditional positive regard. You know, if I was in this person's shoes, might I have done the same thing? Saved by the grace of God, go I, kind of thing. You know, if I was under all of these circumstances, could I have become a drug addict? Kind of things. But he also said, because of the unique experience of individuals and our experience as it compares to that, there's limits to that. There's limits to the degree to which we can truly understand. That value system represents, when I was taught counseling, and you say, the phrase, I know how you feel, was like, don't ever say that. That was the value system that came down from that. You can never know exactly. That was sacrilegious in the world of counseling, probably still is. And so I don't know how you feel. I may have similar experiences. I might have very similar experiences, and it doesn't matter. Explain to me your understanding of what Rogers refers to as the unique experiential field limit. Kind of a really big technical term for describing what we could never know. And then I bring into, and it's come up in the discussions, and I've actually replied to some people and said, hey, just wait till next week. The notion of the self that comes from Carl Rogers' work, and underneath his premise, the purpose of psychotherapy for him has to do with personality, has to do what he refers to as the self and the decisions we make. He has a model where there is an ideal self, the kind of person we want to be. There's the public self that we use, that we present to the public. That's the self that we make everybody know about. And then there's our real self. Maybe we have dirty secrets. According to Rogers, the purpose of human development, psychotherapy, personal growth, spiritual enrichment is to bring those together. That those start to look more and more like each other. That my ideal self, maybe I cut back on that because I realize I'll never get there. Maybe in my true self, I'm actually saying, I got to get rid of some of these things that I don't feel really represent me. And then my public self starts to really match up with the ideals I really want to live by and my true behavior of who I am. And the more congruent those are, congruence between the ideal, social, and true self was the goal the goal of life, let alone the goal of development, the goal of psychotherapy, is to find ways to bring those together. So I'm asking you to reveal, this would have been a better discussion actually. So I like when people can reveal times in which you found yourself incongruent. Now, I'm not asking you to talk about anything really wild, but times in which now I acted in a way that was not who I am. Or even positively. Let's say I'm a great defender of, personally, I'm going to share something with you. I asked you to share all kinds of things. I'm a defender of the basic premise of women's right to choose regarding pregnancy. I think it's complicated, but there's a basic value system I have of that. But there are times when I go to the church that I go to, which espouses a very different viewpoint on there, I might say that I do not represent my true self when I'm there. I choose, first, to not bring it up. 2, to be very subscript about if I'm asked about it and say, I contextualize it. This is what I believe. I'm totally respectful of what other people believe. And I choose not to be that, fight for the rights sort of person in that context. I'm not there to pick a fight on that particular topic. And so in a way, I can be seen as I'm not being my true self, but I'm adjusting my social self to take into consideration the people around me that in almost every other way, we are aligned. There's just a few areas where we're diametrically opposed, but I favor focusing on the ways that we're aligned. And I think that's a much better way to get these conversations happening anyway. And so I might choose at times to not be my true self because of the context that I'm in. So not being your true self, that's manipulating that public self, is not necessarily a bad thing. There are times in our social world where we probably shouldn't say what's on our mind. We might get the satisfaction of shock value or being argumentative or demonstrating our convictions, but other people might be hurt. And you have to kind of balance that. Relationships might be hurt. People might be extremely uncomfortable. And depending on the situation you're in, that's not always what you're there for. It's just not. And being nice to people, I think, is paramount. Certainly will keep their ears open when it does come time to expressing your views. That's a whole value system in itself. So anyway, I'm asking you to reveal times at which you felt you did not live up to your ideal self, you did not truly represent yourself in the public, and things about your true self that never reached the light of day. And again, I'm not being voyeuristic. I'm just interested in your understanding the difference between true self, social self, and ideal self. And Roger's notion that the development of the personality over the course of the lifespan, either with or without the assistance of therapy, was the integration of those 3 cells. There you go. Okay, that's this week. Looking forward to continued great discussions in this class. I'm leaving lots of feedback, which I usually don't necessarily do, but I've been really inspired by the work that people have done really deep in the quizzes. People really diving into this, and I really encourage you to do that. It's very fun for me to read the quizzes and how far people go with these things and personal examples and stuff like that. It's really a very enjoyable process for me to see that learning happen. So keep up the great work. So have a great week. Be well, and I will see you next time.